I started drinking when I was 13.
I was in and out of jails.
My drug had become my priority in life.
This is where I'm gonna die. There's no way out of this.
There are no quick fixes for the diseases of drug abuse and alcoholism. For an addict, recovery is an ongoing process. Because addictions disrupt so many aspects of an individual's life, treatment is never simple. The Drug Alternative Program presents Drugs Close to Home, your weekly insight into the ongoing stories of struggle, victory, and the spiritual renewal of rehabilitation. Each week, Cliff and Freddie Harris would like to introduce you to the many people who have touched their lives through their spirit-filled ministry. But most of all, they would like to share with you the blessings they continue to receive from Jesus Christ. And now, your hosts of Drugs Close to Home, Cliff and Freddie Harris.
Welcome to Drugs Close to Home. We thought we'd do something different today. You know, we always have guests, but we've had a special need. We know we have 2 recovery homes that are paid for, but we have a transition home with a mortgage. And we thought we would do an event, remember, honey?
Yes.
To raise funds to pay off our transition home.
And you know, one thing was special about that was how we were going to pull something together. And you know, I remember talking to Dr. Carson, and he wanted to come and do a benefit for us. But I'm like, how are we going to get this thing together? How are we going to pull it together?
Dr. Carson has been one of our honorary board members. He's been a big supporter of DAP. And he said, have something big. And we thought, well, how about the Crystal Cathedral?
Crystal Cathedral? How are we going to pull that off?
And we did. We started working for a whole year on this event. And,
no,
you know,
that wasn't a whole year, Freddie.
About 6 months.
It was about 6 months because
Right.
he said we needed to start working on it for a whole year.
Right.
But we didn't come up to about the Crystal Cathedral until about 6 months into it. And that was a difficult thing.
And we worked hard.
Yes, we did. You talk about work hard. We worked hard with that.
And we were kind of afraid because that cathedral holds 3,000 people. And how are we going to fill it up? And as we got closer, our legs started shaking like, are the people going to come?
And even in that event, Freddie, you remember, I doubted God.
Yes.
Yes.
But we did our part. We worked really hard. And I remember there were over 3,000 people in attendance.
Do you know what? The graduates gave up their seats for people to sit down. There was no just standing room that we filled up that place.
And that's just God.
Just God.
And today we thought we would give you some excerpts from Dr. Ben Carson's speech. You know, he's the director of neurosurgery at Johns Hopkins Hospital. So we want you to hear some of his speech today.
There I was with, in the 5th grade, terrible student, worst student you can imagine. I was the one shooting paper wads, telling jokes. My favorite thing in the world, however, was getting other people kicked out of class. And I got to tell you, I was really good at it. I would study my classmates, and I would figure out what made them really, really angry. And I would just irritate them until they were about to explode. But I would never push the last button to make them explode until we were in class and the teacher was nearby. Then I'd push the last button, they would explode, the teacher would kick them out, and I would say, yeah, this is great. And but there was this one girl. Now, she was Miss Goody Two-Shoes. Anybody remember Miss Goody Two-Shoes in their class? Everything perfect, everything pristine on time, made everybody else look like a jerk. And I said, boy, wouldn't it be great to get her kicked out of class? So I started studying her, but the problem was, you know, she was hard to figure out what made her angry. She was just calm. And I said, wait a minute, I can figure this out. And I kept at it. I finally figured out what got her angry. I tell you, she was steaming. It was coming out of her ears. She was about to explode, but I didn't push the last button. I waited till we were in class, and lo and behold, she sat right down at the desk in front of me. And I said, the Lord is good. And as the teacher approached, I pushed the last button to irritate her, but she didn't explode. She just calmly turned around and said, "You and me on the playground at recess." So that didn't work out too well. You know, I became a neurosurgeon. She became a professional wrestler. But I did stop bothering people after that. But, you know, the kind of student that I was, I frequently encounter because I have a program at the hospital. I bring in 800 students at a time. And I show them slides of the human brain and the kinds of things that go on in the academic medical center. We talk about various types of medical careers and human potential. And at the end, I allow them to ask me questions. But sometimes I ask the questions. And I remember asking once, how many of you can name for me 5 NBA players? Do you realize virtually every hand went up? Everybody could name 5 NBA players? I said, what about 5 NFL players? No problem. Major League Baseball players? No problem. Rap singers, movie stars? No problems. I said, who can name for me 5 Nobel Prize winners? Out of 800, only 10 hands went up. I said, leave your hands up because I'm going to call on one of you. All the hands went down. What does that tell you? And then I said, look, this is the information age, the technological age. Who can tell me what a microprocessor is? Now they were weary. Only one young man raised his hand. I called on him. He proudly stood up and he said, a microprocessor is a tiny processor. That was it. That was the extent of his knowledge. Extremely superficial. And, you know, it's kind of a shame because there are so many people in our society who know stuff that doesn't matter. You know, there was a survey done looking at the ability of 8th grade equivalents in 22 nations to solve so-called complex math and science problems. Our nation ranked not in the top 3 or the top 5 or the top 10 or the top 15 or the top 20. We ranked number 21 out of 22. And we barely beat out number 22. It was neck and neck. Science and math. Now, I suspect if the survey was measuring knowledge of sports and entertainment, we would have wiped them out. But that's not what's going to maintain the position of our nation in the world. Do you realize that our nation only produces 60,000 engineers a year, 40% of whom are foreigners? China produces 392,000 engineers a year. You don't have to be a brain surgeon to figure out where that's going. You know, we are going to have to change that equation. We are going to have to begin to emphasize those things that are intellectually important. You know, I'm fascinated with history. And a little over 100 years ago, a French educator and philosopher by the name of de Tocqueville came here with his entourage to study the American public education system. Why? Because we were producing superior products. And the rest of the world was very interested in how we could do that with our public education system. If you really want to be fascinated, go back and get a 5th or 6th grade textbook from 100 to 150 years ago and see what the students were expected to be able to do. It will blow your mind. The exit exam from middle school, I dare say, could not be passed by most college graduates today. We have dumbed down the system so much. And, you know, the brains that God gave us were not meant for mundane things. He didn't give us all of this sophistication so that we could dabble in mundane things. He wanted us to be able to put that to some good use. We all have the ability to do that. We really need to start thinking about that. And, you know, since this is Black History Month, I need to say something here because there is a segment of our society that is particularly affected by this, and that is the young black males. Many people have heard it said that the young black male in America is an endangered species. Why do they say that? Because there are more young black males in jail than there are in college. Because the homicide rates for young black males in our major cities are astronomical. It's the most common cause of death for them. That's absurd. And some people say, I'm not a young black male. I don't know any young black male. It's not my problem. Wrong. Because, you know, for every one of those young people that we keep from going down that path of self-destruction, it's one less person you have to be afraid of or protect your family from. One less person you have to pay for in a penal or the welfare system. One more tax-paying, productive member of society who may discover the cure for cancer or a new energy source. We cannot afford to throw any of them away. They are all very important people. And, you know, anybody who's involved in the education arena knows that the young black males are great students, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, just like everybody else. But, you know, as they start getting into the higher grades, something strange begins to happen. They start getting caught up in that negative peer pressure, start trying to be cool. And as they read those history books, they notice that there's nobody in that American history book who looks like them who really did anything important to contribute to the building of our nation. They say, maybe next year when I take world history, but the same thing happens. And everybody wants to know, what did my ancestors do? How did they fit in? Then they come home and they turn the television on and they say, oh, there they are. Playing baseball, basketball, football, rapping in those baggy pants, acting a fool on some sitcom. And you begin to develop a very different image of what success for you means. And by the time you discover that you're not going to be the next Michael Jordan or the next Puffy Daddy, you know, it's too late. And up drives this big black Mercedes with tinted glass, and out steps this tall guy with furs and jewels and women. He says, want to be like me? I can show you how to get all that stuff. Beside that, that society sold you a bill of goods. Next thing you know, you're looking at the 6 o'clock news and you see this young man shielding his face from the cameras, being led away in handcuffs. You say, that's little Johnny. What happened? He was such a good boy, having committed some heinous crime. But what happened to little Johnny happens hundreds of times every day across this nation. And it didn't have to happen because anybody from any nationality or background could have taken little Johnny by the hand when he was 6 years old and given him a black history lesson that he would have never forgotten. They could have started by pointing to his shoes and saying, you know, it was Jan Matzliger, a black man, who invented the automatic shoe lasting machine, which revolutionized the shoe industry throughout the world. And he steps on that clean street, you tell him it was Charles Brooks, a black man, who invented the automatic street sweeper, those machines with the big brushes, and down that street comes one of those refrigerated tractor-trailer trucks. You tell them it was Frederick Jones, a black man who invented the refrigeration system for trucks, later adopted for airplanes, trains, and boats, and it comes to a stop at the red light. You tell them it was Garrett Morgan, a black man who invented the traffic signal. And while you're talking about Garrett Morgan, you can tell how he invented the gas mask, saved lots of lives during the war. And while you're talking about the war, Henrietta Bradbury, a black woman who invented the underwater cannon, made it possible to launch torpedoes from submarines. And you'll see a beautiful black woman walking down the street. A black man did not invent her, but you can use that opportunity to talk about Madam C.J. Walker, a black woman who invented cosmetic products for women of dark complexion, was the first woman of any nationality in this nation to become a millionaire on her own efforts. And you'll walk past the hospital and you can talk about Charles Drew and his contributions to blood banking, understanding of the function of blood plasma. Daniel Hale Williams, the first successful open heart surgery in the world, operative mortality rate of less than 1.5%. You look up at the surgical light, Thomas Edison. You didn't know he was black, did you? Well, he wasn't, but his right-hand man, Lewis Latimer, was. And you can tell how Lewis Latimer came up with the filament that made the light bulb work for more than 2 or 3 days, how he invented the electric lamp, how he did pioneering work in incandescent and fluorescent lighting, how he diagrammed the telephone for Alexander Graham Bell, was a tremendous inventor in his own right. Most people have never even heard of him. And you walk past the railroad tracks and you can talk about Andrew Beard, the automatic railroad car coupler that spurred on the Industrial Revolution, Elijah McCoy, the automatic lubrication system for locomotive engines. In fact, Elijah McCoy had so many inventions, whenever something new came out in the industrial arena, people would say, is that a McCoy? Is that the real McCoy? That's where the term comes from. You got racist people like David Duke talking about the real McCoy, don't even know who they're paying homage to. And you know, I'm just barely scratching the surface. So you can see that young man never had a reason to believe that his ancestors didn't contribute mightily to the development of this nation, and he should feel fully invested in this nation and in its welfare. But you know, I can take that same walk down the street, more importantly, for virtually any nationality in this nation, and I can point out tremendous contributions that were made. You see, that is the reason that this nation, the United States of America, reached the pinnacle faster than any other nation in the history of the world, because we had so many people with so much talent from so many backgrounds who were able to contribute. And I have to tell you, our diversity is not a problem, it is a strength. And that is why we are called the United States of America. We would do well to remember that.
Welcome back. We're watching excerpts from Dr. Ben Carson's speech at the Crystal Cathedral, our evening of inspiration. And what an inspiration Dr. Carson was to us.
Freddie, wait a minute. I want to stop you just a second. This man is phenomenal when he speaks.
Yes.
I know that you're enjoying it. I was just overwhelmed when he was just talking. And this is one of his, people have come to me and said this is one of his best. And you know what, Freddie? You looked so beautiful that night. I'm telling you, you were the queen of the auditorium.
You looked handsome too.
Praise him, praise him. But we want to get back to make sure that we see some more of his speaking. Now, don't forget, next week we're going to have Take 6 on
Right.
that, right?
Right.
Yes. So look for that for next week.
And you know, you have to realize that we were made in the image of God. And God is no dummy. And he gave us these tremendous brains for a reason. And when we sit around and talk about what we can't do, what are we saying about our Creator? We really need to start thinking about that. Well, you know, having gotten everything under control academically, I still had that horrendous problem with my temper. I was one of those people who thought they had a lot of rights. And you know, the more rights you think you have, the more likely someone is to offend you. And it all culminated one day when I tried to stab another teenager. And he had on a large metal belt buckle. And fortunately, the knife struck it with such force that it broke. And of course, he fled in terror. But I was more horrified than he was, as I realized at that moment that that temper was out of control, and that even though I had turned things around academically, I would never realize my dreams of becoming a physician because of that temper. I ran home and I locked myself in the bathroom, and I fell on my knees and I just prayed, and I said, Lord, you got to take this temper from me. I cannot control it. I've tried. I can't do it. And there was a Bible, and I picked it up, and I opened it to the book of Proverbs, and I started reading, and there were all these verses about anger and temper. And I remember specifically Proverbs 19:19. It said there's no point in getting an angry man out of trouble. He's just going to get right back into it. But also 16:32 that says, mightier is the man who can control his temper than the man who can conquer a city. So many verses, so many chapters, and they all seem like they were written for me. And I stayed in that bathroom for 3 hours reading and contemplating and praying. And I came to an understanding while I was in there that to react, to punch somebody, to kick down a door was not a sign of strength, but rather it was a sign of weakness. And it demonstrated that you could easily be controlled by other people and by circumstances. And it meant that you were the weakest thing in the environment. And I didn't like that. And through the grace of God, I was able to understand that if you just step outside of the center of the circle, then everything's not going to be about you. And if everything's not about you, then nobody's infringing upon your rights, and then you're not going to be angry. And when I came out of that bathroom after 3 hours, that temper was gone, and I've never had another problem with it since that day. And you know, some people say, you just learn how to hide it. But I got to tell you something. When God fixes the problem, he doesn't just do a paint job. He fixes it from the inside. And it really is quite empowering to be able to do virtually anything without somebody being able to make you angry. And I would encourage anybody who has a problem with anger, again, before you get angry, take a brief time out and just say, wait a minute, is this about me? Am I being self-centered? And answer that question honestly. And then try to approach whatever the situation is from another angle. You'll find after a while that it's actually fun. It's fun, particularly if somebody who's used to being able to make you angry can't make you angry anymore. And just watch how angry they get. It's kind of fun. It really is. Well, the other thing I discovered that day is that God is nice. God is a wonderful, wonderful individual who loves each one of us. He won't force himself upon us. But if we will open ourselves to him, he will do virtually anything for us. You know, he didn't have to give us color. He could have made everything black and white. Look at the beauty of the earth that he has given us. And yet, there are people who try to say that God doesn't exist. And they're looking at the things that he did, the wonderful things that he did, and using that as evidence against him. The evolutionists, for instance, say because of natural selection, because things can adapt to their environment, that things can change from one species to another. Well, you know what? The ability for species to adapt to an environment is actually the sign of a loving and very intelligent creator who didn't want to have to start over every 3 months. That's not a sign of evolution. And you know, Charles Darwin himself said that his theory of evolution would be proven on the fact that they would be able to lay out the fossil remains of everything from a single cell organism all the way up to man. Lay them right out in a row and so you can see how it happened. He just said that they weren't sophisticated enough geologically to do that at his time, but in 50 to 100 years they would be. Well, that was over 150 years ago, and we still haven't found them. Where are they? Let me tell you something. You're not going to find them because they don't exist. Things don't change from one species to another species. And you know what? God knew that people would be coming up with that stuff, and that's why in the very first chapter of the Bible, he talks about one species bearing after its own species, because he knew what people would be trying to do in order to get rid of him, because if they can get rid of him, then they don't have to have any morals and they don't have to have any values, and anything they want to do, they can do. We know what it's all about. But you know, the wonderful thing also, as I thought about what God did for me with the temper, realize how loving he is and how nice he is. And I resolved in my own heart to also be nice, because the best form of flattery is emulation. I think we all should try to do that. And I want us to do something here tonight. I want us to take the niceness pledge. Everybody raise your hand. We're going to take the niceness pledge. All hands up. If the person beside you doesn't have their hand up, you may kick them. Okay? Because now you can put your hands down. You have to be nice now. Now, what does that mean? It means you're going to be nice to every single person you encounter for 1 week, okay? That includes members of your family, okay? And spouses. Now, that means no talking about people behind their back for a week. Now, some people will stroke out. I understand that, okay? It means you see somebody struggling, you're going to help them. Men, it means we're bringing chivalry back. You're opening the doors for the ladies. You're holding the chairs for them. Okay? Ladies, it means you're not cursing them out when they do that. Okay. You're getting on an elevator. There's only one space. It means you're letting somebody else get on. It means when you're on the elevator, you're not going to act like you never saw the numbers change before. Speak to people. You may have to practice CPR, but talk to people. Talk to janitors, talk to maids, talk to security. Talk to people you normally walk by and act like they don't exist, because they do, and what would your life be like if they weren't there? You're going to get in your car. The parking lot is jam-packed. There's no spaces. You see 3 people following you in their car because they want your space. When you get in the car, you're not going to open the glove box and pull down the mirror. Just get out of the space. Yeah. You don't have to revel in your power. Just get out of the space, okay? But what are you doing during that week? Thinking about others first. What kind of society could we have if we all began to practice thinking about others first? Just think about it. And we can do it. We can do it. Well, I'm going to have to wrap up here. But, you know, one of the things, when I got to medical school and first set of comprehensive examinations, I didn't do so well on. And I was sent to see my counselor, and he looked at my record, and he said, "You seem like a very intelligent young man. I bet there are a lot of things you could do outside of medicine." And he tried to convince me to drop out of medical school. He says I wasn't cut out for medicine. Well, you know, that hurt because it was the only thing that I really had ever wanted to do. He said, "You've only wasted 6 weeks. We can get you into another discipline. We can help you get into something." So, he was trying to be a nice guy. But I went home and I said, "Lord, you got to help me here." And I started thinking, what kind of courses have you struggled in? What kind of courses have you done very well in? I struggled in courses where I listened to a lot of boring lectures. And there I was listening to 8 hours worth of boring lectures every day. And I did well in courses where I did a lot of reading. So I made the executive decision to stop going to those lectures and to start reading books. And the rest of medical school was a snap after that. And I remember when I went back to my medical school as the commencement speaker, I was looking for that guy because I was going to tell him he wasn't cut out to be a counselor. But
we hope you enjoyed something different this week. Are you a Take 6 fan? If not, you will be next week, so be sure and tune in.
And remember, we love you, and Jesus loves you even more. And we'll see you next week.